This week on the Walk On podcast.
I am a big believer looking back on life in the sliding doors principle, right? Like the decisions we make, these things that are inconsequential, land us where we are. Those aha moments of, I think this is a sign. I think I need to hit pause and focus on myself.
Welcome to the Walk On podcast, season 2. We are just continuing a dialogue with great guests this year, covering a lot of different topics. And today will be no different, no pressure, but today will be no different. Another great conversation. For those of you that are returning guests, thank you very much. We appreciate it. For those that are new, a little bit of an introduction. The Walk On podcast really started as a journey for me about 2 years ago, really trying to figure out what's next in my career. And I started reading all these books about finding your passion and finding your joy. And candidly, a bit of it's a racket. I would say, a third of the books are really good. The rest are just doing really well on the internet. And I just sort of was like, you know what? I want to talk to people who are really living those interesting, passion-filled roles where they're leading from a place of purpose. And I've been fortunate enough to do that. I love talking to people and hearing what makes them tick. And so we're going to continue that today. The last thing I'll share before introducing our guest, EJ Stern, is Walk On comes from a song by the same name. And I just love the lyrics that talk about continuing it may be a dark night, but you'll hear the song of the lark and there's light at the end of the tunnel. Walk on, continue to pursue where you are, persevere. And I always tell young professionals as I mentor them or coach them, put your head down, do the work, build the tools, and you'll look up and be amazed at where you are. And so that's what I'm doing with this journey. And I'm here today with EJ Stern. EJ, welcome.
Thanks. Thrilled to be here today.
We have known each other for at least a decade now, which is crazy to believe. And we have some mutual friends in common. But EJ is founder of the Fractional Law Firm CMO, which we're going to talk about today. It's a first to market company offering fractional marketing services to small and mid-sized law firms. And they've really experienced tremendous growth. They're hiring their 7th full-time employee after just 18 months, serving more than 20 law firms across the US and Canada. I love talking to entrepreneurs. I love hearing how they came up with their idea, what the experience is like. And so, EJ, welcome aboard.
Thrilled to be here. What a fun podcast. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, tell our listeners and viewers a little bit more about yourself and your firm.
Yeah, sure. I am a lifer in the legal marketing space. I've spent over 20 years running business development, strategy, and branding for law firms, large and small, from AmLaw 100 firms, so firms that have 500 to 1,000, to most recently serving as CMO of North America for one of these mega multi-thousand everywhere in the world firms. So love this space. Never dreamed I'd be doing this, but here we are. And about 18 months ago, as you mentioned, I launched Fractional Law Firm CMO. It's been a blast. We still work with the big firms on coaching and strategic initiatives and training. But the meat of our business is really offering strategic legal marketing resources and support to firms of all sizes. And we're having a blast doing it.
That's amazing. So we'll get back to a little bit more of the specifics of the services you offer, but you said, I never imagined myself doing this. So how do we go from there? You're a CMO at a huge firm, and then you're like, you know what? I'm just going to start my own thing. How does that happen? What does that look like?
It's funny. I am a big believer looking back on life in the sliding doors principle, right? Like the decisions we make, these things that are inconsequential. And I'll share some of those in a bit when I talked about sort of my career trajectory, land us where we are. And for me, there's so many moments that I look back and say, I wouldn't be here if not for. And from a crane falling on my apartment in New York City that brought me to Atlanta, Georgia, where I met my now business partner, to sort of a health scare and our house being broken into, sort of all in the same couple of weeks. And one of those moments, those aha moments of, I think this is a sign. I think I need to hit pause and focus on myself. So that was the lead into the departure to big law. I thought, at 36, I was a CMO. It was my dream. It was my passion. And all of a sudden I got there, and it was one of these moments in life where I said, this is always what I wanted to be when I grow up. And now that I'm here, I'm not sure that this is it. I had a two-year-old at the time, was traveling all the time. And when the sort of the house scare and the house break-in sort of collided, it was one of those moments where I just said, I got to hit pause, focus on myself, focus on my family. And it gave me a lot of time to think. It was scary because my identity is so tied into my profession. And that was sort of living the dream for me as the CMO. But it gave me time to reflect. I went back. I heard that you're getting your executive coaching
I am.
degree, which is great. And I did the same. And I was consulting and coaching and loving it. And then I think after one too many calls from a headhunter saying, EJ, come back. Big law needs you. It was one of those moments where I thought, and I remember saying, never, but never now, right?
Yeah.
I had
Yeah.
two small kids, and I realized that these firms, these big firms have 50, 75, 100 marketers, highly specialized, highly niched down content writers. They have podcast teams, they have video production teams, which is incredible. But they're these small and mid-sized firms that may have a half a person,
Yeah.
two people, sometimes supporting hundreds of lawyers, and they need that same level of sophistication. They just don't need a full-time solution, and they
Yeah.
don't need a forever solution. And so
Yeah.
this wacky idea came up, and here we are.
I love it. And, I'm in my day job when I'm not podcasting, right? I have a public affairs consulting firm, and it's
Right.
evolved into this. I no longer have employees because it's just I serve as a fractional. There's a nonprofit that I'm serving as a fractional head of development for them. And there's I'm a COO for another. So I think these organizations are really realizing, I think there's been a change in the marketplace that we do want that sophistication. We do want that skill set, but we don't have the resources to add that headcount or, so it's an option.
Absolutely. And it's been fun. It's fun I don't know about you, but I've loved sort of pivoting and working with different firms, different sizes, different goals, different niches. So we've really had a blast doing it.
Yeah, it keeps you fresh. Well, maybe if we can, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your career arc, but in doing that and maybe start at this place and work back, whatever works for you. But I want to dig in a little bit about that moment where you're like, I use this on another podcast this season, the dog caught the bumper, right? You're chasing the car and you get this role and you're like, I've worked my whole career for this. And all of a sudden you're like, well, that stinks. That's not what I envisioned. So what is that like? And how do you start to find your way out of that situation? So I want to cover your career arc. So take that however you want, start with a career arc and get to that answer or start
Sure.
there and reflect on the career arc.
So yeah, absolutely. So sliding doors, as I said before, really, who knew? And I am one of the few lifers. My entire career started in college in legal marketing. But how I got there, how I made that decision that sort of forever changed the trajectory of my life was in my senior year in college. I was debating between a couple of internships. And ultimately, my decision, as college students make decisions, came down to three factors, right? It was, well, this one will let me sleep a half hour longer. And I don't have to change metro lines in DC, which is code for sleep a little bit more.
There you go.
And they pay me $1 more. So let's do it, dollar more. And so I ended up working at the time at one of the biggest firms in the country, Steptoe Johnson, in their legal marketing department. I had always known I was going to be a lawyer, right? Like so many children growing up watching Law and Order, that's it. That's my future. I can do that. And the expectations were everyone in my family is a doctor or a lawyer. So I thought this will give me a good bird's eye view as to what my future is. Started doing the legal marketing stuff. Quickly pulled my applications and said, I do not want to be a lawyer. Right. Another aha moment where, what am I going to do when I grow up? And worked at Steptoe for several years, moved to New York for grad school. I'm going to make a total pivot and be done with these lawyers. I was called by the CMO of Steptoe. We have a New York office. Will you come run the New York marketing? And I was a poor student, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I guess I'll do it. Was going to go to get my PhD. And the market crashed in 2007, as we all know and remember. And so stayed the course, went to another firm. Again, never dreamed I'd be in this crazy space. Crane fell in my apartment. Okay, let me call my headhunter. Ended up in Atlanta at Trump & Sanders. Spent 10 years there, loved it. Built out one of the first in-market in-house business development coaching programs at the firm. and then was swept away to the CMO gig, which was really exciting. And again, dream boat for me. But it's funny looking back that decision at 21 would forever shape my life and give me a path that, I was the black sheep in the family. I was the one who went against the grain and did something, but I really focused on following my passion and love it. And what did you say? The dog and the bumper? The dog hit the
Yeah,
bumper?
dog caught the bumper. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was like, this is it. I'm here. This is
yeah,
such an opportunity. And it was an incredible firm working with incredible lawyers. But I was on the road every other week. I had a little one at home. I was working constantly. And I think I had a lot of perspective as to how firms ran and how the politics worked. But sitting at the table with the C suite and hearing how the sausage is made and understanding the inner workings was a big awakening.
yeah,
And, I'll be honest, I don't think I would have pivoted if one of those things had happened, the house break in, the house scare. I probably would have stayed the course. I'd probably still be in
yeah,
big law as a CMO today. And I think it was just the timing. I'd just
yeah,
gotten back from the Mayo Clinic 2 days later, broad daylight. Our house was broken into. And it was one of those moments where,
yeah,
you really do reflect on life and how fortunate we are. And I remember when I made the decision and I called my boss, so the global CMO, to tell him, he thought it was just a chit chat. And I said, so I have some big news. And he was, I think, probably expecting I'm going to have another kid.
right.
And I said, I'm giving notice. And he was shocked. He flew in 2 days later to convince me I love this because this is so classically British. Why don't you just take a sabbatical, EJ? And I kind of laughed and said, we don't do that in America. And I can't just, I built a team from scratch. I was the first CMO. And I was like, I can't do that to my team. And I know that I personally won't be able to just cut out and focus on
Yeah,
myself.
yeah,
So I stayed through the end of the year and had this big moment, time to reflect and time to really dig into what is it that I want to be when I grow up. And,
mhm,
that journey looked really different, but
yeah,
I loved the consulting side. I loved getting exposure working with firms and people. And like you, sort of working, every day was different. And, you know, probably thought I'd end up in that world for a while and or going back. And then, thank you to those recruiters in August 2022 that weren't
yeah.
leaving me alone, right? And like grateful for a family that supported my wild ideas. The jump was easier because I'd already made the big leap from big law.
Yeah, yeah. That's great. And there's so much wonderful stuff that you've shared to unpack there. I just, I'm sort of, you talked about there, I think it feels like I don't have data. It feels like there's a minority of people who are like, in this season of the podcast, we talked to somebody who's a doctor and she knew at 9 years old, she wanted to be a doctor and very specifically, what she wanted to do in medicine. And I'm like, I wanted to be a broadcaster and a hockey player or a landscape architect. And I'm doing none of those. Although I guess I am doing broadcasting now, but so that's a bonus. But I just sort of landed as I love the sliding door metaphor. I really just sort of landed. I was looking at grad schools, 1 year out of college and looked at communications because people said I'd be good at that. And that took me to Georgia, right? These opportunities that I sort of tell people I backed into my career. So it's good to know there's other people like me out there. But I loved that process for you. Talk a little bit if you can, and I want to get to your company again in a second, but what was that process? So all of this sort of happens that you get back from, seeing doctors and your house is broken into and all right, you realize I've got to do a change. But what was that process of? Was it literally like putting a checklist together, a pro and con list, or just like I had this idea and I'm jumping? Like what was that process to before you told your boss I'm leaving? What was that process to pull together your company and decide, yeah, this is right for me and my family and all the other people?
Yeah. I mean, it's something I look back on all the time and say, wow, I really did that. I'm a extremely risk averse person. You wouldn't believe it because I quit a big job that was a dream job and I started my own company.
Yeah.
But I'm highly risk averse. I just think it was, you know, the health scare was really serious. We didn't know what the future would bring. And I think that already put life into perspective. And then the PTSD from our break-in was one of those, moments. I don't know that I put a lot of thought to it. It was like,
Mhm.
I got to do this for me because I got to get in a better space mentally and
Yeah.
physically. And, it's a really one of those moments when you have kiddos and this, like, it totally changes your priorities and perspectives.
Yeah.
And I will say I would not have had a second child if I'd stayed the course, which would have been okay. But like my second is just as special and magical and just a dreamboat like my first. And I'm so grateful to have her and to have her along on this
Yeah.
journey. But it is like, I wish I could say like, I thought very methodically through this and like put together a list and really thought through because that's what a traditional EJ move would be. But
Yeah.
it was literally like done.
Yeah.
And my husband
Well,
was really supportive, thankfully. And my family was like, we got you and gave me the space to really figure out what was right for me in the moment and take care of myself and my family in the way that needed to be done.
I'm a big believer. I'm not, I was raised Catholic, which is to say, like a lot of us, I've moved out of that faith. And so I'm not terribly religious, but I do believe in there are things that happen for a reason and higher powers or whatever. And, to me, it sounds like what you're saying is it was just the right opportunity. All these things came together and it wasn't much of a process at that point because it just felt right.
Right. I think that's exactly right. And it's also true as it relates to Fractional Law Firm CMO. It wasn't like a plan that I was baking and mulling over for months or years. It was a families hanging out in the lake house watching football, and I could care less about football. I had 2 hours to myself, started tinkering around on the internet and just thinking about life, right? What is my passion? What is my bliss?
Yeah.
And came out of like my room in the lake house and said to my husband, I have this crazy idea. Here's the logo. It's the same logo we have today, which is hilarious because my creative team is itching. Yeah, I'm like, go for it, go wild with it. But it's kind of stuck. This
Yeah.
very literal name. And my husband, who's a former McKinsey consultant, looked at me and he said, why haven't we talked about this? Like, I could help you from the strategic side, like map this out. And I think he was kind of hurt. And I said,
Oh, yeah.
honey, I came up with this in the last 2 hours. This isn't something I've been, and it was one of those moments too, because I am an overthinker. I
Yeah.
do like to mull over things. And I think one of the special things about our company is that Catherine and I, we don't just sit and think about things. We sort of iterate as we go. We launched the website
Yeah.
really quickly. We made all of our decisions really quickly and sort of adapted and adjusted and learned as we went.
Yeah, I honestly, there is so much I think of value there. So often, as a public relations professional, people are like, you just I call it navel gazing, right? You'll clients or organizations I've been at, you're sort of like paralysis by analysis. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, we got 10 versions of our logo, and let's really pour over where that comma is in the sentence of our motto or our mission. And you're like, the perfect is the enemy of the good. And I truly believe that. And yes, you want to put your best foot forward. And yes, you want to make sure you're a success, but move fast, break things, see what works. I fully believe in that. And I think that is the difference between entrepreneurs and other people, I think, is that there's a willingness to, now that you're not so risk averse, there's a willingness, and it's easier once you're successful, right? You're doing well and you're like, oh, this is good. But I think that is the case. I think you, as an entrepreneur, there's just part of you that's like, we're going to go in that direction, and I'm confident enough to adjust as I need to.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about the firm and specifically what you do, and then maybe some challenges as you launched the business and how you tackled it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we really offer fractional CMO services. That's about 75% of our business. We go in and in most industries, a consultant will come in, and this is certainly true about legal. There are lots of brilliant consultants who do trainings, who do strategic working sessions, who come out with this brilliant strategic plan and they hand it over to the firm and sort of bye. I often joke
Mhm.
with my husband, like, that was McKinsey, right? Like, here you go. You got it from here. And I think our offering is really unique because we come in, we help build out the strategy, we help do the analysis, we help create the roadmap, but then we have an entire team to help with that implementation. And so that can vary day to day. That can be doing research and analysis, putting together a business plan for different practices that are go to market to expand existing client base. That may be building out content calendars and running social media for firms because in a post-COVID world, perception is reality. And
Yeah.
gosh golly, you got to be on LinkedIn. And especially if
Yeah.
you're a B2B company, it's so critical. And in the legal space, something like 57% of in-house counsel are checking LinkedIn 2 to 3 times a week, which is
Oh my
a
gosh.
pretty astounding. Yeah. And it goes up from there about, that's 5 days a week. And, 70 something percent are checking at least 2 to 3 days a week. So it's pretty astounding. And it's sort of as a pure business development strategist, as someone who just thinks about revenue generation all day and all night, I never would have dreamed that social media would be a huge part of
Yeah.
the business plan. But in a post-COVID world, it is. So yeah, it's like your world, I'm sure every day is different. There could be writing press releases. There could be training a group of lawyers on how to leverage their client relationships. There could be building out entire strategic plans on how to cross sell a client. So how to bring in another practice. Every day is different, which is exactly how life is at law firms when you're in-house. But this time we're pivoting rather from practice to practice, we're pivoting from firm to firm with different niches and expertise. So it's been a blast. We've been really fortunate. We've had incredible opportunities with firms initially that we had worked with previously. And I have a long history of working in this industry. My business partner and I have a combined 40 years of experience. I really focus, and I mentioned, on the business development strategy. And her background is running branding and marketing operations and a former lawyer. And so with Catherine and I, we sort of marry the two sides of the house. Business
Yeah.
development should always drive the strategy for the firm, but you have to bring it to life through the marketing tactics. So
Sure.
it's been really cool iterating and creating, but not without challenge, as you've
Yeah.
mentioned.
Gosh.
I think, Catherine and I can run circles around legal marketing. We're pretty darn good at what we do in our day job, but we've never run a business. And so
Yeah.
figuring out the operational side for us, and how to scale has been huge and
Yeah.
deeply time consuming. We've spent a lot of time focusing on the brand and focusing inward. We're really lucky that we've had incredible professional resources to work with us, lawyers that have really guided us, fractional CFOs that have made sure that financially we're in the right place and moving in the right direction. And like Anna Ruth was talking about in a previous episode, we've brought on a business coach, which I think will
Yeah.
really move things forward in a meaningful way. So that's been a big part of the challenge, creating repeatable process so that every client is getting the same level of
Yeah.
service and excellence.
Yeah. That's the challenge. And you said something, but that's great. And you said something before that I find really fascinating that I felt too. I had this nonprofit, and they're a larger nonprofit, but they paid me six figures to come in and do a communications audit and to create sort of a whole new strategic approach with language, and then sort of launching this campaign, engaging elected officials and policymakers around budget decisions. And it was really new in my career of being an entrepreneur. And I was like, well, that's a great contract for me. And this is great. I love the organization. I know them very well. And I wrote the plan and it sat on a shelf.
Right.
$100,000 plus to a firm or to a nonprofit is a big deal. And so we tried to okay, let's have these quarterly meetings or monthly meetings. And it just, nothing was done. And it just stayed with me. I actually felt terribly guilty that I'm like, they hired me. It was very clear. I delivered everything I said, but it didn't make an impact because they just went back to so having that fractional relationship where you are engaged with them in a meaningful way long term, you're helping them create the strategy, you're helping them execute it, you're seeing the work come to fruition, and you're seeing the needle move for them in a way that I think, as you said, just hiring a consultant who comes in and is like, hi, bye, here's your plan. It's very different.
It's very different. And I think people were initially suspect, right? Like, oh, how's this going to work out for those girls?
Yeah.
And Catherine, my business partner, I convinced her to leave her big cushy job with a $2 million branding budget at an Am Law 50 firm. Like, take this big leap with me and do something
Yeah.
crazy. And, no one knew how it turned out, but it's been really humbling and exciting to see other consultants pop up in this space now. I think sort of proof
Yeah.
of concept has happened, and
Yeah.
to be able to be, there's so much work to go around. There's so much need.
Yeah.
So you're always happy to talk to and mentor others as they're looking to join this journey. But yeah, it is a categorically different offering, and it's been really fun to be a part of it. And some clients do keep us long term, but our offering, like our proposal, is often, you don't need full time, you don't need forever. We'll get you up to
Yes.
speed and running. We'll help implement. And right now, with one of our big clients, we're helping them. We've sort of framed out, this is what you need to continue.
Yeah.
And we've engaged a recruiter, and we're helping hire
Great.
our backfill, which is really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're really truly helping them to learn how to fish for themselves and do the work and even identify people. Well, you mentioned excite. So what is it about the business that excites you and gets you out of bed each day?
Yeah, great question. Without a doubt, my team. We have an incredibly talented team. They push us, they challenge us, they inspire us daily. They are so talented. We are big believers in hiring people smarter than us. And we certainly have that. I mentioned operations as one of our biggest challenges. And we brought on a director of operations who has changed my life. She's been amazing and allowed me to focus on my best and highest use, which is not operations, because it scares the heck out of me. Um, but yeah, like, our team is just an inspiration. They are so smart. They're so talented. We've hired in gaps in areas that we knew weren't our strengths. So we have this creative genius. I tell her that should be her title. And we never dreamed we'd be doing branding for firms, like full blown developing logos and
Yeah.
concepts and sort of brand tone and voice. But we leaned into it because we have someone so talented in this space, and it's been
Great.
a whole new offering. So that's been a big excitement. Also, just being able to innovate daily and to really see this transformation happening in a meaningful way in the industry because of this crazy idea that we cooked up over a weekend at the lake.
Yeah. That's amazing. And honestly, I'm just, for those viewers, you'll see it, but if you're listening, EJ literally came out of her chair as I was asking, like, what's exciting and what gets you out of bed every day. So clearly this is work that you're passionate about, and you found that. Well, two last questions. I want to be thoughtful of your time. What's next for you in the company?
What's next? I think as we continue to grow, the next step over the next year will be scaling up our CMO talent. And so looking to bring on the senior CMOs so that it's not just Catherine and I think we're going to hit our bandwidth soon. And we want to make sure that we have the support, infrastructure, and resources to ensure that continuity. So we've been approached by lots of industry greats who are sort of approaching retirement and maybe creating a place to be an off ramp as they look to scale back their time, and a resource to these firms all over the country, which will be cool. And then we're writing a book.
Oh my gosh.
Things I never dreamed I'd be doing. But
part two.
Yeah, part two. So that's coming next year. It's really focused on women develop business differently than men. It's not the golf course. It's not the social clubs, right? It's women approach it differently, and success looks different often. And so we're interviewing a ton of leaders in the industry, from general counsel to senior partners at law firms who have just knocked it out of the park, to marketing professionals and beyond, corporate professionals who can give insight and wisdom as to how we can do it differently, how we find our own path to success.
I love it. That is so exciting. Clearly, you're clearly on the path. You're clearly on fire. I love it. Last question. What advice do you have for someone who's trying to figure out their passion or their fractional CMO company? What's your advice?
There's a lot of unsolicited advice given in this world. A lot. I mean, I grew up with it. I've shared some of that. What success looks like, what a good path is to follow, what your career should look like. For me, it was, you're going to be a doctor or lawyer. And my suggestion would be, ignore that advice. Think about your inner voice, what in your gut feels right, and be willing to take those risks and follow that passion, because you'll end up places you'll never dream of. and I think you'll end up happier. I mean, going against the grain and taking those risks can be scary. And yeah, sometimes they pan out and sometimes we just learn a lot from them. But I think we'll all be happier if we follow that inner voice and sort of go with our gut on what we feel like is the next best thing for us.
I love it. That is a perfect place for us to stop today. EJ, it's so great to see you again, and it was a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Well, you've been listening to the Walk On podcast, people leading with passion and purpose, providing a roadmap for your personal journey. Hear their stories, find your passion, walk on. Again, EJ, it was great to talk to you. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Next up on the Walk On podcast.
Often there are things that have been suppressed or built or covered over that just don't enable us to really live our full selves. And if you are able to break down those barriers, you can do it for yourself, but then also for others. And then you're leading through passion and you're really working in a way that is service-led. It's an enabler and it is empowering.
Notice me looking at you. Well, I've been staring for hours, thinking about exactly what to do to you. I can't believe you didn't notice the 1,000 times I walked by. I must have looked like a neon sign saying, look at me.